Welcome back to Inside Politics. Today, our guest is Dr. Thomas Schwartz at Vanderbilt University. We're talking about the war in Ukraine, which enters its fourth month this week. Dr. Schwartz, so many rumors and stories coming out about President Putin. There's talk about him being gravely ill, that he's had cancer surgery, that he somehow thwarted an assassination attempt that began right after the war. The prediction is that he might enter a sanatorium because of mental health problems as early as 2023. You put any credence in any of those reports?
I tend to be skeptical. I did consult with my sister-in-law, who's a professor of history, of Russian history at the University of Oklahoma, and she remarked that Putin didn't look good, particularly in a lot of his recent video appearances compared to the past, and that he's had a lot of Botox and things like that to make him look younger. But that it's the other thing she said is that Russians right now are in a very conspiratorial position, and so that the idea of conspiracies and all the rest have spread. The fact that they've spread are not at all surprising, and the idea that Putin is secretly ill, all of these things are there, but honestly, we don't know.
There have been few secrets kept in this war. In fact, less than I can ever remember any other war. Another prediction at this point is that perhaps we're seeing some of these because there is a sign that perhaps a coup is brewing. Or do you think that may be a sign we see more and more of these things, that there's something there? Is there smoke where there's fire, or maybe not?
I doubt it. I don't want to doubt it necessarily, since some type of coup could actually lead to a quick resolution of the war if a new leadership came in. But I just don't see it. In fact, if anything, some of the sounds coming from Russia recently, they had a veterans group that said we have to go to full mobilization. Remember, the Russians have designated this as a special military operation. They haven't talked about a war. And in fact, there is the argument that they should do more, that they should attack more. So I'm not seeing particularly that necessarily we're moving toward any type of overthrow.
There was a report this week that a top Russian diplomat quit in disgust over the war this week. Is that a sign that perhaps there is some growing unease among Putin's government? And secondly, there's some people saying, well, what he's going to do now is he's going to look for a ceasefire, get some peace, and if he keeps the land that Russia's already gotten, and then say, well, that's what we want to do all along anyway.
That's right.
Change the goals of what he had in mind in the first place, which was take over all of Ukraine.
Right. The diplomat who quit made the point that he thought that there was some dissension, but that he still felt that the majority of his colleagues supported the war and supported the nationalist objectives. So at least from his point of view, it was a remarkable statement and quite a dramatic statement. As far as how Putin will sell this to the Russian people, I think that is what you described, the scenario described, is close to being it, namely that he will have successfully liberated the two people's republics that they had recognized before the war and created a land bridge to Crimea.
If the Russians feel, Putin in particular feels that more and more isolated, more and more like they are losing this war, might that increase the chances that he'll use biological or chemical or even nuclear weapons?
That has been speculated upon, that a defeat. This is one of the arguments going on in the West, is how much to press the Russians, how much to try and lead to a complete Russian defeat. There is that argument. Ann Applebaum, for example, a prominent Washington Post columnist, made this argument in the Atlantic that Russia needs to be defeated, Putin needs to be defeated. But there is also the counter-argument that actually former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger made, that the Europeans have to live with Russia, and so they'll have to make some sort of compromise. And here's where it's going to get very messy, because the Ukrainians, having dealt with war crimes, having dealt with some of the awful abuses that this attack are in no mood to really compromise and give Russia the territory they've gained. One
of the major stories of the last couple of weeks has been the possible expansion of NATO to also include now Finland and Sweden. Mm-hmm. Both those countries already belong to the European Union. Why do they want to join, and what's in it for NATO if they do join?
Well, the simple fact is they want to join because they feel that they need that protection. They have been surprised by the outright Russian aggression against the Ukraine, and they feel that if Ukraine had been part of NATO, that would not have happened. So both Finland and Sweden have dealt with Russian incursions in the past. Finland, of course, famously fought the Russians in 1939 and 40. So I think both countries feel like this is that their security requires now being in NATO, which is a dramatic shift for both. Sweden was neutral in World War II, so this is quite a change.
President Putin was quite bellicose when this idea was just talked about at the beginning of the war. Now suddenly when it's happened, when both those countries have now asked to become part of NATO, he's been rather quiet. Is that a change?
This is a change, and part of the reason is that...
But he's not bellicose about it at this point.
He can't do much about it now, and he can't really threaten. They have moved forces that were potentially forces that could have threatened parts of the Finnish territory or something like that. They've had to move them to Ukraine. In that sense, he's not in a position to use the military in quite the way he would have liked to intimidate Sweden and Finland.
Now, all the current NATO countries must approve membership for both Finland and Sweden. In recent days, Turkey has been raising objections. Why are the Turks opposed?
The Turks are using this as a bargaining leverage. They feel that Sweden and I think not Finland as much, but Sweden in particular has offered asylum to many of the Kurdish forces that have fought against Turkey. Some of some who have been designated as terrorist organizations by the Turks, and they want to get a change in policy by the Swedes over that. There's also, of course, another issue in terms of American weaponry, which is also a question, and that they may be doing this in order to force Washington's hand.
Well, I think the people in Turkey know that the Ukrainians are getting some weapons they'd like to get. Do you think that's going to be part of the deal? The U.S. will say, okay, we'll give you some of those same weapons as well, as a way of saying, come on and approve this NATO membership.
Yes, and what was interesting is today the BBC had a report, of course, that the Greeks are very worried about this because the Turks are going to get these weapons.
Dr. Thomas Schwartz, our guest from Inside Politics this week. He's a professor of history and political science at Vanderbilt University. We're talking about the latest in the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion there. Back to continue our conversation on the other side of these messages.